Imagine balancing two part-time jobs, skyrocketing rent, and a full university course load in a country that's thousands of miles from your family.
Yeah, that is a heavy load.
Right. And now, imagine finally hitting your breaking point, asking your university for a mental health lifeline, only to be told that the next available appointment is like 6 weeks away.
Which is just a staggering amount of time when you're in crisis.
Exactly. And for thousands of modern students, this isn't some nightmare scenario. I mean, it is just Tuesday.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into a collection of research focused on a genuinely growing crisis, which is student mental health in Canadian post-secondary institutions.
And we really aren't just here to admire the problem today.
No, definitely not. We are exploring an innovative grassroots solution that students are basically building entirely themselves just to survive. They are called mutual aid networks.
Yeah, and it's a massive paradigm shift, honestly, in how we handle psychological distress. We're sort of moving away from looking exclusively at top-down institutional help.
Right, the traditional clinics and stuff. Exactly. And we're examining how peer-to-peer support is fundamentally changing the landscape of mental health entirely.
I do want to emphasize right out of the gate, though, for everyone listening, while this deep dive focuses heavily on university and college students, and specifically, newcomers to these spaces who deal with intense isolation, the themes here apply to you.
Oh, absolutely. The themes of community care, stress, and burnout, they apply to absolutely everyone.
Yeah, if you have a demanding job, a family to support, or honestly just a pulse in today's fast-moving world, the lessons these students are learning absolutely apply to you. So to start us off, we need to clearly define the exact parameters of the problem.
Right, because we need to know what we're actually dealing with here.
Exactly. I mean, we know being a student has always been stressful. Staying up late to cram for exams is a tale as old as time.
Yeah.
But the research we're looking at paints a picture of a pressure cooker that is just completely unprecedented. So why is this crisis escalating so dramatically right now?
Well, the difference between historical student stress and the modern crisis really comes down to the intersectionality of the stressors.
What do you mean by intersectionality in this context?
So in decades past, the primary stressor was usually just academic performance, getting good grades. But today, academic pressure is just one layer of this multi-tiered crisis. You have crushing financial stress fueled by a massive cost of living crisis.
It's everywhere right now.
Exactly. Plus, you have profound systemic loneliness, which is actually exacerbated by the increasingly digital nature of modern coursework. And you have this impossible struggle to maintain any sort of work-life balance.
Because the concept of being a full-time student is basically a myth now, right?
Yeah, it really is. Most students are full-time students and part-time workers simultaneously.
And for newcomers, like international students or out-of-province students, you can essentially multiply that stress by 10. I mean, they are trying to navigate these complex institutional bureaucracies, often in a second language, while dealing with intense financial anxiety due to, significantly higher tuition fees.
Which just compounds the pressure day after day.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the data on this is actually staggering. The American College Health Association put out a report back in 2023, and they explicitly pointed out that these mental health concerns aren't just hurting grades, they are destroying students. And this is a, quote, daily functioning.
Yeah, that phrasing is very deliberate.
It's that phrase that really gets me. We aren't talking about getting a C instead of an A here. We're talking about being physically unable to get out of bed, complete executive dysfunction.
Right. And neurologically speaking, when a human being is subjected to chronic, inescapable stress from multiple vectors of financial, social, and academic, the nervous system eventually just shuts down.
It's like a blown fuse.
Exactly like that. The depression and the drastically poor academic results are really simply symptoms of a system overload.
It feels like the modern student experience is essentially trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle. You're trying to balance the jobs, the finances, the social isolation, and the schoolwork all at the exact same time.
And trying not to drop any of them.
Right. But if the university clinics and institutions have all this data showing that the unicycle is wobbling, why is the traditional system struggling so much to catch these students when they inevitably fall?
Well, the core issue is something we can call systemic lag. Traditional systems, like a university counseling center or an institutional health clinic, they were built for a totally different era of student life.
So they're just outdated.
Essentially, yes. They are fundamentally bound by strict clinical protocols, liability concerns, and massive student-to-counselor ratios. I mean, in some universities, you might have one counselor for every 2,000 students.
Wow. So it's essentially just a numbers game. If you have a campus of 30,000 students and only 20 therapists, the math just fundamentally doesn't work.
The math fails completely, and that creates this massive bureaucratic bottleneck. To get help, a student first has to realize they have a clinical problem. Then they have to navigate an often confusing digital booking portal.
Which is hard enough when you're already exhausted.
Exactly. And then they get triaged. Now, if a student is experiencing active suicidal ideation, they rightly get bumped to the top of the list. But if a student is, just profoundly lonely, severely anxious, and failing their classes due to brain fog,
they just get put on that infamous 6-week waitlist.
Exactly. And in the timeline of a 15-week academic semester, a 6-week waitlist means your semester is basically over before you even get your first intake appointment.
That is wild. The sheer volume and complexity of modern student needs have totally outpaced the actual institutional infrastructure.
Without a doubt.
So, okay, if the university clinic has a 6-week waitlist, what happens on week 2 when a student is having a panic attack and they can't pay their rent? I mean, they can't just pause their life and wait for the bureaucracy to catch up.
Well, nature abhors a vacuum. When top-down systems fail to provide immediate, accessible relief, the marginalized communities within those systems are forced to step in. They build a new approach from the ground up just to survive.
Which brings us to the lifeboats these students are building for themselves. The mutual aid network.
Yes, yeah.
Students are looking at the 6-week waitlist and deciding to turn to each other instead.
Yeah.
But let's clarify this, because mutual aid is a very specific term. It's not just another word for charity, is it?
Not at all. Charity is vertical. It's a dynamic where someone with resources gives them to someone without resources, often with strings attached or, a dynamic of pity.
Right, a bit of a power imbalance.
Exactly. A mutual aid network operates horizontally. It is equals helping equals. It's a highly intentional system of peer-to-peer support based on shared lived experiences.
So it's about solidarity.
Yes. It recognizes that the person sitting next to you in your chemistry lecture understands the exact specific pressure you are under far better than a clinician who graduated 20 years ago.
I love that. And this connects beautifully to a standard the World Health Organization put out back in 2022. They explicitly stated that mental health is an integral and essential component of health. It's not a luxury.
Right, it's baseline survival.
Exactly. To me, the traditional counseling model kind of feels like reading a fitness manual written by a doctor who is observing you from behind a glass wall. Like, it's technically correct, the advice is scientifically sound, but it is deeply detached.
That's a really good way of putting it.
Whereas mutual aid feels like having a trusted spotter at the gym who's actually lifting the heavy weights with you. I mean, they know exactly how heavy the bar is because they are sweating too.
The spotter analogy is perfect because it really highlights the mechanism of safety here. The spotter isn't going to perform surgery on you if you tear a muscle. That is still a doctor's job. But the spotter's presence keeps the heavy barbell from crushing your chest in the first place.
Okay, I love the spotter analogy, but I do need to push back on this concept just a bit.
Sure, go for it.
When I hear, like, community care or peer support group among highly stressed university students, I instantly picture a group chat at 2 a.m. where everyone is just trauma dumping.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Right. It sounds like it could easily turn into a massive doom spiral.
So how does a mutual aid network avoid just becoming an echo chamber of anxiety? How is it tangibly different from just complaining with your friends over coffee?
Well, if a group is entirely unmoderated and lacks structure, it absolutely can become a race to the bottom.
Yeah, that's what I'd be worried about. But mutual aid networks avoid the doom spiral through a distinct mechanism, which is intentionality paired with actionable support. It shifts the conversation from passive commiseration to active material and emotional care.
Give me an example of what that actionable care looks like in reality. Like, if a first-year international student is panicking about failing a midterm and facing eviction, how does a 19-year-old peer stop that panic from infecting the whole room?
So first, the network offers emotional validation, saying your struggle is real, it's not a personal failure, it is a systemic failure, and I see it.
Which is huge on its own.
It is, but then immediately moves to action. When someone says, I can't afford groceries this week because my rent went up, the network's response isn't just, yeah, the economy is awful.
Right, it's not just complaining.
Exactly. The response is, we have a student-run food share program that pools resources. Let's get you a box of food today. Or, I know how to navigate the International Student Visa Portal. Let me sit down with you and help you fill out this specific extension form so you don't lose your status.
Oh, wow. So it's heavily focused on the practical logistics of surviving the university experience.
Yes, which directly relieves the psychological stress.
That makes a lot of sense.
And crucially, a well-structured mutual aid network explicitly does not try to act as amateur therapists. That is the biggest misconception. And honestly, if it were true, the system would be incredibly dangerous. The boundary is the most crucial part of mutual aid.
How do they enforce that boundary, though? Because if someone comes into a peer support space in a severe mental health crisis, these are still just students. I mean, they aren't equipped for psychiatric emergencies.
Right, they aren't. But the peer facilitators are trained in red flag recognition. They learn how to spot the difference between severe burnout and a clinical psychiatric emergency.
Okay, so they know when to escalate it.
Exactly. When a crisis exceeds what peers can safely handle, the mutual aid network acts as a bridge to professional help. Instead of telling a terrified student, oh, you should go to the clinic, a peer in the network will say, I'm going to walk with you to the clinic right now.
That is so powerful.
It really is. They'll say, I will sit in the waiting room with you and I will help you advocate for an expedited appointment. They remove the isolation from the actual process of seeking clinical help.
That makes complete sense. They are navigating that terrifying bureaucratic portal together. So, okay, understanding the theory of mutual aid is one thing, but to see why it actually works, we need to transition into what it physically looks like on a campus.
Right, the day-to-day operations.
Yeah. How is this safety net actually woven into the daily fabric of a university?
Well, it really comes down to practical, regular activities that operate parallel to the university's official channels. We are looking at structured, peer-led support groups, specific stress relief events, and open discussions designed to dismantle that feeling of isolation.
So creating safe spaces, basically.
Exactly. It's about creating physical and digital spaces where the mask of having everything perfectly together can finally just come off.
And the sources outline some highly specific timeline goals for this implementation too. They suggest that within the first 3 to 6 months, the goal is simply to organize these support groups and awareness activities. Just, getting the basic infrastructure in place.
Right, the foundational stuff.
But the 1-year goal is what really caught my attention. Within 1 year, the goal is to have more students feel completely comfortable asking for help and openly discussing mental health. Honestly, that sounds staggering to me.
It is an incredibly ambitious target for just 12 months, for sure, but the underlying research actually supports why it's a necessary approach.
How so?
Well, the Canadian Mental Health Association noted in 2023 that social connection is a vital protective factor for mental well-being. And I know that sounds like a bit of a platitude, but neurologically, we systematically underestimate how protective deep social connection really is against the development of severe mental illness.
I mean, I believe that, but I still can't get over that 1-year timeline. Trying to change the entrenched, highly competitive culture of a massive university campus feels like trying to turn a massive cruise ship using, like, a kayak paddle.
That's a great analogy.
You're fighting decades of institutional habits where students are taught to hide their weaknesses at all costs. Setting a 1-year goal to completely change how students talk about mental health seems incredibly fast. What is it about these specific grassroots events that accelerates emotional resilience so quickly?
It all comes down to the power of proximity and shared vulnerability. Think about how universities usually try to tackle this. Top-down institutional mandates, like an email blast from the dean's office or maybe a glossy poster in the hallway saying mental health matters.
Yeah, those really do not change culture.
They don't. They lack emotional resonance entirely.
They feel like corporate compliance, not actual care. When I see a poster like that, I don't feel suddenly inspired to share my deepest anxieties.
Precisely, because the power dynamic is still vertical. But research shows that peer-led social support directly builds emotional resilience because the vulnerability is mutual.
Give me a scenario of how that plays out.
Sure. Imagine you are in a brutally difficult engineering cohort. Everyone is pretending they're doing fine. But then one of your peers, someone you know is facing the same impossible deadlines, stands up to lead a stress relief event and admits they failed a midterm and cried in their car.
Wow.
Yeah. In that 1 second, the illusion that everyone else has it perfectly together shatters.
Yeah.
Grassroots events build trust exponentially faster because the power dynamics are entirely removed.
Right.
You aren't trying to turn the cruise ship from the captain's wheel up in the bridge. You are getting everyone on the lower decks to lean to one side at the exact same time.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it.
Yeah.
When the 4.0 GPA student admits they are drowning, it just gives everyone else permission to admit they are treading water too.
Exactly.
But that brings us to the final hurdle. It's really the elephant in the room regarding all of this research. Because you can design the most perfect mutual aid network in the world, and you can organize the most welcoming stress relief events. But it will all completely fail if the underlying campus culture prevents students from walking through the door in the first place.
Right. You are talking about the invisible barrier.
Yeah.
The stigma.
Yes. Smashing the stigma is an absolute necessity for any of this to function. Students must feel completely safe asking for help without any fear of judgment, whether from their peers or their professors.
And that's usually the hardest part.
It is. The sources highlight that targeted mental health awareness programs are proven to improve help-seeking behaviors. The Mental Health Commission of Canada put out a standard in 2022 that states quite simply, talking openly about mental health can reduce stigma.
Which is a foundational psychological principle. Stigma thrives in silence.
Right.
If you don't talk about a struggle, it remains hidden, and what is hidden inevitably becomes wrapped in shame.
But this feels like a massive classic chicken and egg paradox to me. You need students to talk openly in order to reduce the stigma, but you need reduced stigma to get students to feel safe enough to talk openly in the first place.
It is definitely a tricky loop.
Right. If an international student is terrified of looking weak and losing their funding, they won't speak up. And if nobody speaks, the stigma stays. So how does a grassroots mutual aid network actually break that loop?
Well, the loop seems completely impenetrable from the outside, but the mutual aid network acts as a structural circuit breaker. It forces the issue through extreme visibility.
Walk me through how that circuit breaker actually works in a real dorm or like a lecture hall setting.
A mutual aid network doesn't wait for the stigma to magically disappear before it acts. It relies on a core group of early adopters who are willing to take the social hit.
So they just brave it out.
Yes. When a few brave students take the terrifying first step to loudly and publicly lead these awareness programs, they absorb the initial friction. They might set up a table in the middle of a busy student union building offering hot chocolate and explicitly ask people to write down their biggest fear on a whiteboard.
So they are forcing the conversation right into the public square.
Exactly. And when the broader student body sees their peers acting openly and not being punished for it, it instantly normalizes the behavior. It proves, in real time, that community care is a shared responsibility, not a solitary, shameful burden.
It's incredible.
Yeah. The stigma loses its structural power the very moment people realize they are not the only ones carrying it.
So it's the bravery of the first few that creates a sort of slipstream for everyone else to follow safely behind.
That is exactly how the culture shift accelerates. And once that slipstream is created, the culture shifts dramatically. That is why the 1-year goal of fundamentally changing the conversation isn't just a naive pipe dream.
It's actually possible.
It is a highly measurable outcome of reducing stigma through peer visibility.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? Let's distill the core insights of this deep dive. We've seen that the modern student faces an unprecedented, multi-layered pressure cooker from academic, financial, and profound social fronts.
And the old systems, the slow-moving, heavily bureaucratic institutional lifeboats, they just aren't coming fast enough to pull people out of the water.
Right. But by combining the necessary professional clinical resources with the active, shared community care of mutual aid networks, people are forging a powerful new tool for emotional resilience.
They really are. They aren't waiting to be saved. They are creating their own safety nets. They are learning to navigate the bureaucracy together, pooling resources, and actively destroying the illusion of perfection.
And if there's one core takeaway we want to pull from all this source material to leave you with today, it is this. In our fast-moving, high-pressure modern lives, experiencing psychological distress and systemic burnout is incredibly common.
Very very common.
Feeling entirely overwhelmed is not an anomaly. It's not a character flaw. It is a completely natural reaction to an unnatural amount of daily stress. Always remember, asking for help is not a weakness. It is a profound sign of strength. It takes immense courage to admit you need a spotter.
And taking that first step to ask for a spotter is really the only way to begin reclaiming your well-being. It interrupts the cycle of isolation.
Which leaves us with a lingering thought to consider. We spent this time exploring how vital and effective these peer-to-peer mutual aid networks are at bridging the gap in universities. We've seen how they create safe, welcoming spaces, particularly for newcomers who feel entirely disconnected from the systems around them.
It's life-changing work.
It truly is. But I want you to look beyond the university campus. If this horizontal, community-driven model of care works so well to smash stigma and build resilience among stressed students, wait, no, think about how might we replicate this exact model in our own corporate workplaces.
That is the big question.
Yeah. How could we implement mutual aid in our own neighborhoods, or even within our own extended families, to combat the growing silent isolation of modern life?
That is the true challenge presented by this research. Taking the survival lessons learned in the campus pressure cooker and applying them to the broader world to build stronger, more resilient communities everywhere.
Because at the end of the day, we are all just trying to keep the unicycle upright. Maybe it's time we stopped trying to juggle the flaming torches all by ourselves in the dark and started passing them to people right next to us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking out for each other.